We're here today at Dolforwyn Castle. Dolforwyn Castle is one of the castles along the Welsh marches. A little bit more about that a little bit later on. I'm here with Robert and I'm here with Lynn. After the siege of this castle that was done by Roger Mortimer, tell you more about that a bit later on, but the people then moved their establishment a little bit more upstream and they built a new town there. They didn't know what to call it, so they called it Newtown.
Wasn't very imaginative then, was they?
They had a competition to who came up with the best name.
To get up here, it's a bit of a trek.
It's hell of a trek. Why did they build it on the top of a hill?
They tended to do that in upper castles.
Yeah, they didn't think about the old ones, did they?
Yeah. I can't imagine anybody bringing blooming siege engines and armour and cannons all up here.
I wouldn't have bothered personally, I'd just let them have it.
Let them have it. You know, do you want the castle? Yeah, here it is, you can have it.
I mean, if you want to get water, it's miles downhill.
Yeah. Llewelyn local supporters. Read that, Rob.
It says, a new town sprang up close to the castle near its main gate. It is stood on the level ground you have just walked through. Quite a walk through as well. The Welsh castle was designed to be supported by the people of the land around it. The town provided let's read that again. The town provided it with supplies of the workforce, craftsmen. It also helped to defend the castle gate. I think so. That's you got the picture of the castle there. The castle, however, couldn't defend the town. It was destroyed when the English attacked and besieged the castle in 1277.
Let's hear it for the English.
The castle was built in 1273. And then we're going to talk about the Marcher Lords, or Edward is. A new master, the Marcher Lord Roger Mortimer, took over and moved the settlement down into the Severn Valley below. To this day, as we've said before, it's called Newtown.
He took it downhill. It got a bit of sense.
Well, don't blame them, really.
Yeah. Here's the first look of the castle. When did you say it was? 1277 it was built?
Built in 1273.
1273.
Taken over in 1277 by Roger Mortimer, and he did improve it. He built a well which people suffered from before, and we'll show you where the well was built and the castle wall around the well. This looks like the Great Hall. Let's see if it tells us where it is. Right, before we go on to tell you about the princes that lived here and built this place, you can see from this wall here where the original wall of the castle was. So that's what it would have been to that point there, would have been 1273. Then when Roger Mortimer took it over, you can see that bit there is the new part of the castle. Just down there is the well that he built. And the River Severn is just a few hundred yards to the west of us. But we'll probably see a bit more of that a little later on.
These are some of the elder inhabitants that are occupying the castle today.
Okay, this castle that we're standing here today is, I think, the last castle in Wales to be built by a native Welsh prince. That prince was Llewelyn ap Gruffydd. Llewelyn ap Gruffydd was the grandson of the great Llewelyn Fawr, or in English, Llewelyn the Great. Now I'll tell you a little bit about him. He had a son, Gruffydd, by a lady called, and I'm going to apologise for my Welsh pronunciation here. He had a son, Gruffydd, by Tangusti or something like that. Can't be exactly certain how you pronounce it, but she wasn't of noble birth. That was Gruffydd. We'll come on to him. He then, Llewelyn Fawr, or Llewelyn the Great, married the favourite daughter of King John, whose name was Joan, and she became known as Joan of Wales. They had a son called David, and he was then first in line to the Principality of Gwynedd, which was there. But he didn't have any offsprings to follow him on.
Take 3.
Gruffydd was then fighting for his birthright, what he thought he had the right to be. And it was always the same with Welsh princes. They was always fighting each other for who owned what land. They'd never had primogeniture, who was the next in line for the throne. So he was a problem. He married a woman called Sinanna, who was the mother and father, Gruffydd, of Llewelyn ap Gruffydd, who built this castle. It didn't end well for Gruffydd. He was imprisoned a lot by his father, his brother David, and also later by King John. And King John imprisoned him in the Tower of London. Gruffydd tried to escape the Tower of London and fell to his death by climbing through a window, and he fell head first into the stones below. So that was the end of him. His son then, Llewelyn, Llewelyn the Last, built this castle in 1273. Bit of history behind him. He married the daughter of Simon de Montfort, Eleanor. So she was nobility in her own right, and it would have made Llewelyn the Last a mighty, powerful Welsh prince. But it didn't end well for Llewelyn either.
He lost at Evesham, didn't he?
Yeah, it was better than Game of Thrones, this was. It didn't end well for Llewelyn either. Although he'd married Simon de Montfort's daughter, he lost control of this castle in 1277, and later on, and I think it was 1282, he was lured away from his army, probably by Roger Mortimer's army, or what you call them, some knights working for him, and he was murdered. I could say killed, but more likely to be murdered in 1282. He was murdered.
Hang on, sorry, the camera went. Who was murdered in?
Llewelyn the Last, the Llewelyn that built this castle, was murdered in 1282 by knights, probably of Roger Mortimer. And it was a gruesome end as well. Not only was he killed, he was decapitated, and his head was sent to the king to prove that he was dead. Now that might seem gruesome, but you have to remember there was no photographs, and they didn't have WhatsApp to prove that he was dead, so they sent his head.
Moving neck.
Yeah. Now, as I've said, this castle was put under siege in 1277. But why was it put under siege, you ask?
Why was it put under siege, Rob?
I'm glad you asked that. Well, Llewelyn fell out with the king. Henry III didn't want them to build this castle in the first place, because there's just 4 miles away, there's a castle at Montgomery that was owned by the English, or under the control of the Marcher Lords. So they never wanted to build this castle in the first place, but Llewelyn ignored them. He sort of said, well, no, it's my land, I'll build the castle where I want, thank you very much. So that upset the king, and that's one of the reasons why they had the siege here in the first place.
I ought to explain really what the Welsh marches are. I think it confuses quite a lot of people, and it used to confuse me sometimes as well. People think that it's the Welsh marches are where troops used to march up and down.
But it was, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
March from one castle to the next.
No, well, maybe. But Welsh, the marches are, well, it's a foreign term. I forget now whether it's German or French. But march means border or perimeter. So the Welsh marches, or the Scottish marches, they were the dividing lands between Wales and England. And the Marcher lords, they were the most powerful lords in the realm. They were more important than anywhere else in the country, and they were really powerful. Today they would be called marquises. The wife of a marquis was a marchioness, so we get this word marchioness from the marches once again. The Welsh marches really, they stretch from, I suppose, Chester in the north right down to Gloucester in the south.
And Caerphilly and them places.
Yeah, that's right. So these were the Welsh marches.
Edward will put some dramatic music on when he's showing you this bit of film.
I haven't got any dramatic music. I've only got...
Or some music from Game of Thrones or something like that.
I've only got Kylie Minogue. There are, of course, other castles along the Welsh marches. There's Montgomery, as Robert's already mentioned. There's Chirk Castle. What else we got as well?
Whittington Castle.
Whittington Castle. There's a castle at Bluthwells as well.
I don't know, there are some, I don't know what they are. I've not been there yet, that's for another vlog.
Yeah, Montgomery Castle, you say it's only about 6 miles away.
4 miles.
4 miles, that's another slog uphill, isn't it?
Yes.
We should have gone to Chirk Castle last year, but we never got round to it. And I don't know why we were in Chirk.
Yeah, but we'd have to have walked a long way. And we only got the canal boat. And that don't go uphill very well.
No.
I will get down there to show the well.
So they built this castle, then they suddenly realised they hadn't got any water.
Yes. And that's what caused the end of the siege.
So they had to dig a big hole to find some water. Where's that being fed from then?
Oh.
It looks a bit stagnant. Did they have to drink that?
Yes, I wouldn't drink out of it.
No.
Right, I'm going to show you where obviously this. So this part of the wall was Llewelyn's castle, this bit and that bit over there. Then when Roger Mortimer took over, he put the well there, which you've probably just seen. And then that part of the wall, or that part of the castle, was the bit that was built by Roger Mortimer. He's got lost again. I'll have to put him right. As we said, the prince that built this was the last Prince of Wales. So what happened then, or the next part of history, Edward I's son became Prince of Wales, and that title has stood...
He was the first Prince of Wales.
He was the first Prince of Wales, Edward II, and that title has stayed with the royal family even to this day,
yeah.
Prince Charles. So Edward II married Isabella of France. Well, Edward II wasn't that good a king, really, was she? Was he?
No.
So Isabella,
she had an affair
with Roger Mortimer.
Yeah.
And now he was the de facto king, more or less.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until their son, Edward III, had Roger Mortimer killed.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah. If you remember the film, that William Wallace...
What's William Wallace got to do?
Well, according to the film, he had an affair with Edward II's wife, Isabella. But for that to have happened, at the time, she was only about 6 years old. So the film doesn't show that. So that part of the film in Braveheart was total garbage. Plus the fact she wasn't even in the country at the time of William Wallace's
Well, you can't have an
escapade.
affair with a 6-year-old, can you? Not even in them days.
Not even in them days. It was frowned on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was worth coming up here, Rob. I've enjoyed it. It's a good piece of history.
I think it's an important bit of history being the last castle to be built by a Welsh prince.
Yeah. I'd never heard of it either till you mentioned it. It doesn't appear on many television series, does it? Or?
Unfortunately not for television series. They don't mention the Welsh princes. They go on all day about Henry VIII and Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth. They never mention the important parts of history that we're really interested in.
No.
I just mentioned a little bit earlier that Llewelyn the Last married the daughter of Simon de Montfort. So Llewelyn and de Montfort must have been reasonably good friends. But Simon de Montfort, if you remember, was killed at the Battle of Evesham in 1265. So I'm not certain when the marriage took place, and I think it was a little after that.
Yeah, just down there you can't see the main Newtown to Welshpool Road. We haven't got a zoom on this camera. Well, we have, but I didn't know how to use it.
No problem coming up.
Oh, go on. Just to confuse you, just as though Llewelyn was the last Prince of Wales, he wasn't the last prince in Wales. And one that outlived him was his own brother, I forgot his name, Roger or something, and he was executed in Shrewsbury Castle the year after in 1283. So you might want to know that.
Stephen Rodri was in Gavin and Stacey. He played Dave's coach. Probably got nothing to do with the story at all, though, has it?
I don't think it had.
So that is the history of Dolforwyn Castle. And now we're going to make our weary way back down the steep slope back to the car. Thank you for that guided tour, Robert.
Well, it's a good job we're here really, because there's not a lot written on the walls or anything. So you wouldn't have known all this if we hadn't have said.
No, it's been lost to history, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Totally. Right, and just for our avid Welsh listeners,
thousands of Welsh listeners.
Lynn is now going to read this in fluid Welsh.
Godad tref, newid gelwych, castell, ynadl yprif both. Rowedyn seffil, ar I tir, gwastrad, ric chinwed, ei groesoi, ei diod i'r castell.
Double D's pronounced the.
And that was, a new town sprang up close to the castle near its main gate. It stood on the level of the ground you have just walked through to reach the castle. I thought that was pretty accurate, I think almost every Welshman would have understood that immediately.
I think they would have turned off, to be honest, but still. Cue dramatic music. Hang on, Lynn, Edward's filming some weeds.
Nature followers will be more interested in this than the castle.